Have you ever had one of those days where you're just feeling really sad and you've had to seek help for your mental health? How many glasses of alcohol do you drink a night? What prescription medications do you take? Have you ever had surgery? Do you have a problem with eyesight, hearing, dizziness? While all of this information on your private medical history is now being compelled by the Western Australian Police Force as part of your assessment to determine if you are healthy enough to have a firearms license. They have brought this in as part of the new Firearms Regime, Mandatory Firearm Authority Health Assessment Form it's called, where you have to fill out this form. It's a statutory declaration, you must tell the truth. You then go to your GP, who makes an assessment. They can refer you to other specialists if they're not confident with their decision, and that information goes to the police and they get to determine if you are a healthy enough person to have a firearms license while perusing all of your private medical information. Welcome to WA 2025. So let me bring up this form now so we can see what we're dealing with. This is the Firearm Authority Health Assessment Form. As you can see here, it says anyone who wishes to obtain or hold a WA Firearm Authority must fill out this form and go to your GP and go through it together. You must answer truthfully. And some of the questions they have here, like I said before, how many drinks do you have on a typical day? Have you ever had an occasion where you can't stop drinking or you don't remember? Are you currently being treated by a doctor for any illness, injury, or other medical condition? Have you suffered from any of these episodes in the past 5 years? Do you wear glasses, hearing loss? A lot of the boomer shooters do. Then going down some more. Will this affect the patient's ability to use a firearm? Does the patient have a history of mental illness, suicidal intention, or self-harm? All of this here, illicit drugs too, mental health. So this form must be filled out. You must go to your GP and then it's sent to the firearms registry and they get to determine if you are healthy enough to hold a firearms license in Australia, in WA in 2025. Now this has been yet again another big issue coming out of the new firearms regime that we are living under in that state. And it has been subject to the review that is going on in Parliament House at the moment looking at these new laws. So we had representatives from the medical industrial complex, the doctors, the shooters and the farmers have testified in relation to this, as well as the cops. So I'll play you some videos from that today, starting with the Royal College of General Practitioners and their representative, Dr. Mariam Bahima. This was her opening statement. Let's have a listen to what she had to say.
GPs are being asked not only to assess clinical conditions but to predict the likelihood of safe firearm use, a task that is complex, uncertain and without clear standards to guide us. I've heard from GPs who are concerned that some patients are now avoiding or withholding disclosure of both physical and mental health issues for fear of losing their firearms licence. This includes patients with depression, anxiety or suicidal thoughts, particularly in farming and rural communities where firearm use is common and suicide risk is already higher.
I'll just chime in there to say this was actually flagged by former Premier Mark McGowan, who was leading the state when these new firearm laws were announced, and even he said at the time, I pulled up the story just before, it would be difficult to impose, warning that people might avoid vital treatment if they felt their doctor would report them to the police. So this was the Premier in charge at the time when all of this was announced, and he had concerns about this. But somehow it has gotten to the point where it's gotten through. It's now on the books in WA as law. As I showed you on that form, they are considering a person's mental health. And as this doctor has just said, you are now deterring people from getting help because they fear that their firearms will be taken off them for seeking help.
Such avoidance behaviours undermine early intervention, compromise suicide prevention and weaken the very trust that underpins general practice. Many GPs have felt they will not participate in the assessment process as it currently stands because they feel it creates conflict of interest between their duty of care to the patient and that of the community. The risk of reputational damage is also very real. If approved patients later commit a firearm crime, the GP involved may not only face legal scrutiny, but public exposure in the media.
That's the other thing that they were very wild about, the doctors, when this came out. As I said at the start, mental health is fluid. Some days are better than others. You should not be judged on that day to never hold a firearms license because you are in this position by the state that you have to do this test.
Workforce pressures cannot be ignored. GPs in regions are already under immense strain. Where referral is required, waiting times for non-GP specialists such as psychiatry, neurology or geriatrics can be many months, particularly in rural and remote areas.
So there is the ability for the GP to refer someone to another specialist if they are not confident in their decision, if they take the appointment to begin with. We have just heard her say that a lot of GPs, and she pulls up the stats later, 80% of the members surveyed by this association, 80% of doctors said they will not accept a patient to do this authority health assessment with them. They're just not, it's not worth the risk to them. As she had just said, if the doctor signs them off on one day and then the very next day they go out and do something, who's liable? So that was the opening statement from the doctors. Very damning, very damning. Let's play this next one. Is from the Consumers of Mental Health WA, and this is Charles Foster responding to the Greens representative question specifically in relation to mental health.
Okay. Also, it might be said that it is in the public interest that people with mental health problems should not be in possession of a firearm, and that is why the medical assessment is required. Would you say that? What would you say to that assessment? Statement?
I think that there is perhaps a reductionist view of mental health being applied in that statement, and I would definitely want to call that out. I think consumers face a lot of discrimination already in day-to-day life, and considering the facts don't tend to back up those concerns, I would absolutely have some questions around that.
Thank you.
Reductionist approach to mental health. I'm so glad he put that on the record there. He just called it out straight away. And people who do put their hand up and say, I need help with this, discriminated against. And the stigma that's still associated with people needing help. I mean, after what we went through in the early 2020s, is there anyone out there who hasn't had to seek some level of help for their mental health? I know when I was living in Perth behind the iron ore curtain for 4 years, and it was closed for 2.5 years, I couldn't travel across the border to see my family in South Australia for 2.5 years. That certainly had an effect on my mental health. And do you know the way I dealt with it? I went to the range with my mates. They took me shooting. My dad always said to me, if you're ever having a bad day, Kate, go to the range. You never leave the range without a big smile on your face. And that was the way I worked through those problems, blowing off steam with my mates at the range. And now it's all turned into, well, because you're having mental health problems, you can't have a firearm. This next video is also from Charles Foster here.
We're very much in favour of some kind of way of assessing how people are going, whether it's suitable for them to have a firearm. So I'd want to put that out there. The form that would take, I think, really needs to be reflected on and consulting with law-abiding firearm owners and sort of engaging with the community in those discussions of what would work best.
Thank you for asking.
And I think that is not
us.
only to prevent gun violence and harm, but also to make sure that we're dealing often with firearm owners with a very vulnerable cohort who are averse to help-seeking behaviours. And I think that there is an opportunity to, in this space, develop a potentially less confronting or procedural engagement around mental health and make sure that people have that regular point of contact and are able to share, any issues that might be popping up. And I would note that the cohort we're talking around, people who professionally require firearms licences, I'm specifically referring to, once again face or find themselves often in periods of distress based on determinants, whether that be drought, whether that be harvest season issues, things like that. So I think it's really important that whatever process is set up, it has a consistent point of contact and also does not have that fear of losing your livelihood if you're honest about the distress that you might be feeling at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Vulnerable cohort. And we are also talking about a minority group in society in Australia who typically hold firearms license, which just happens to be men. And there's been so much work done in this space to get men to open up and talk about their feelings. And now you have just put around their neck a noose if they happen to ever have a bad day or suffer stress because of harvest season, for example. You will be punished and your firearm will be taken off you because the police do not think you're a healthy person in society anymore. This is what we are dealing with here in WA. And just to remind everyone, I feel like I say at every show, the whole purpose and aim of these new laws, as they said from the start, was to reduce the number of legally held firearms in Western Australia. That's on the record. That's what their aim was, and this is just another way that they are doing this, using someone's private medical information, their health, their mental health, against them to punish them for daring to seek help. Vulnerable cohort. Now, this next one for me is a bit emotional. This is the testimony from a shooter affected. This is my mate, dear Ralph Foley. He is under an immense amount of stress. He is the president of the Western Australian Shooting Association and the veterans group there. This is what he had to say when it came up as part of the hearings with the shooting groups there.
Yeah, on mental health, so I'm a veteran. I represent a veteran firearm owners club. Certainly veterans are concerned about the way police are going to tackle, or the regulations are going to tackle the mental health issues. Because we do have guys with PTSD and some may be on mild forms of medication. That doesn't mean that they're potentially violent. It means they have an injury from their service. So for guys to get together, guys or women, ex-servicemen to get together, whether they go to a shooting range, they're engaging with people, so it is good for their mental health. It's good if they're going out into the country and sitting around a campfire and shooting a couple of feral animals, being foxes or cats. So that's helping the community, the rural communities. So that is a couple of examples of mental health.
Now, the veterans, I would say, have been treated very poorly throughout this whole process. At the start of all of this, one of the first things the government did was bring in a high-powered velocity firearm ban. So they banned a list of, I think it was 19 calibers of firearms, high-velocity calibers that they banned, and that predominantly affected veterans who shoot long-range precision rifle because that's what they are used to in the military. That's what they took up as a hobby when they left. And then those calibers and firearms were banned at the start of all of this. And then now they're being punished again. PTSD, as Ralph said, it's an injury. They might be on medication to help that. I would also say, to represent the women here, postnatal depression. I know a few of my mates have had that. If I am ever in that situation, if God ever blesses me with a baby and I go through that, and someone takes my firearms off me when that is one of my stress releases and something that helps me, reminds me of time spent with my father, very happy activity for me to be doing and good for my mental health, I don't know what I would do. And so my heart is breaking for gentlemen like Ralph and all the veterans who have served us overseas, only to come back, because in Australia it doesn't matter if you've served overseas. If you've been a member of the military, you still have to go through the civilian license process and declare if you're on medication for mental health. and now that can be used to disarm you. This is the world we are living in Western Australia in 2025. This next one is from the farmers, Callum Carrath from Pastoralist and Graziers Association. This is what he had to say on the impact of this on farmers who use firearms.
We heard from the Australian Medical Practitioners Association is that this Firearms Act of 2024 has set back the cause of mental health in the bush by 2 decades. There is no way you are going to get people, particularly men, to go and talk about any anxiety or problems they're having if they believe that their firearms that they need for their work or for their primary source of recreation often as well are going to be taken off them if they so much as mention feeling stressed or anxious. And that is...
So can I just ask, is there evidence that people aren't seeking medical assistance because of the legislation?
Yes.
Can I just also point out, so this really irritates me. If you watched my last video and she was asking the cop to say, oh, when all this dies down with the firearms portal, it'll be business as usual, predicting the future. And now she's saying she needs evidence. Well, you didn't need evidence for the cops to predict the future, but you're putting these blokes on the spot who are saying, this is the effect of well, where's your evidence? But the cops are okay to predict the future. Disgusting. So disrespectful. And you can tell she's been said, this is a part of the law that you must defend. And I'll show you what the cops say later because they are hell-bent on keeping this. And these are her laws from her government. Total disrespect. I'm sorry, I just had to put that in. That's just some people, hey. The people who rule over you. Where's your evidence?
I can guarantee you that.
Absolutely.
To prove that
No
something's
one's-
not happening.
No one's going to say a word.
We're at our conference last...
But we have to make decisions based on the evidence in front of us as well. So, I'm just asking if there is any clear evidence that...
And how do you collect that too? You have the GP saying 80% of their GPs aren't going to do these tests. Do you want to... You want the evidence? Okay, put out an electronic communication because we're all digital these days and ask us, are you going to seek help? Yes or no because of these laws. Get the evidence yourself. You've got enough money. Do it. But no, put it back on the gentlemen who are there to tell you to your face, this is what's happening in the regional communities that you don't bother going out to visit.
People are not seeking...
A good example for us is last year we've had mental health as part of our conference panel for the last couple of years because it is so important. Farming is one of the highest, males in farming are one of the highest suicide rates. And I'm currently organising a conference which is happening at the end of next year. I talk to people about going on a mental health panel again, talking about their challenges, and they've all declined because they don't want to say publicly we've had a mental health issue because they're worried about their licences. So absolutely.
Good evidence.
And it's I talked to the representative of Men's Health, a non-for-profit that works in rural Western Australia, and I spoke to him at the Fitzroy Bull sale, and he just said it has just put them so far back and undermined the work that they have done for the last few years, just from the feedback he's getting from men who are sort of saying, mate, no, won't be talking to anyone.
So what would be the solution to that?
I understand where this is
assessment.
coming from, but as we were saying outside,
Lead us
there's
somewhere.
a nominal number of cases, and I've got this in us that we actually support the Division of General Practitioners when they're saying that it's not possible to pick whether someone comes in with depression or someone comes in with any mental illness, whether they are more likely to do a violent act than someone who has not seen a doctor who does not present with those issues.
Bingo. Because this is what we're talking about here, gun violence and gun crime. Just because someone is getting help for, I don't know, performance-enhancing drugs in the bedroom that the police now need to know about. And that representative was from the Kimberley-Pilbara Cattlemen's Association. She's brilliant. Let's go back to the medical industrial complex. Let's see what else they had to say.
So a question with the GP side of
This is
things.
Rod Caddy's
I've
the
been
One Nation
seeing
bloke
different
asking.
firearms groups, different people commenting about, the cost involved and that. Can you maybe confirm for me? Some people have said it's cost them $350. Other people saying $850. Would that be true to say there's all different costs on getting it?
Yes, so there's no Medicare rebate for the health assessment. So there is an out-of-pocket cost for...
Australia's free healthcare. not if you want a gun license.
Applicants. The cost really reflects the level of complexity of the assessment. And so, for example, if you're very familiar with the patient, they have no pre-existing medical concerns, it could be a very, very simple exercise. However, if that GP then has to review the patient's notes, perhaps even confer with other, with non-GP specialists or with psychologists, that adds to the length of time that it takes. So it really reflects
And
the
the
level
cost.
of time. And we've recommended that GPs use the fee schedule that is set out by the AMA as a recommendation, but it is up to individual GPs to have their fee reflect the level of time and complexity that it takes.
Right, yeah.
So this can cost whatever the GP charges because they have created a monopoly. If 80% of GPs are not going to participate and only 20% do, they can charge whatever they like because it's a very, very specific test and not everyone's providing it. So therefore, the price can be whatever they decide. And you need to pay it because you need to do this assessment to get or keep your firearm. How much? And as Rod said, $800 he's heard some people are paying. I've also heard on the flip side that there are doctors who are taking advantage of this and saying, we'll sign you off, come in and see us. I haven't looked at their fees for that, but I know that this was actually discussed. I think he ran for the Nationals or the Liberals, I can't remember, at the last election, and he's a GP and he just said he would be come down and see me and we'll get it sorted for you. I don't know what he's charging, but this is what happens.
There have been many assurances that doctors will be protected from civil or criminal liability.
So this is the big issue with the doctors. They do not want to be held liable if someone comes in on Monday and then they get signed off when they get all their approvals back and then they go out and commit an offence with their firearm. The doctors do not want to be associated or expose themselves to any risk. This Labor Dr. Katrina Stratton is saying that we, the government, have given you all the assurances you need. Trust us, we won't let you get prosecuted. Let's have a look what the doctors say to that.
So why are those reassurances not accepted?
We don't trust the government, bro.
Given that in the legislation, the assessment is a point in time assessment. So would that not be defensible in a legal setting if you were so called? And I'm just wondering again how it's different from other clinical assessments that do involve risk.
So people often compare it to the driver's licence assessment. Many GPs have expressed concerns because many of us have never used a firearm or handled a firearm. Many of us drive, so we're familiar with the functioning and the skill set needed to drive a car.
I did, as part of my Senate campaign, say that everyone should have safe firearms handling training from a young age. And I was put in the newspaper saying, Kate Fantino, Lady Liberty, wants all children, to be shooters. And it's like, no, I just want people to understand if you ever come across a firearm, you know how to make sure it's not loaded, you know how to handle it safely. These are basic skills I think every human, if they want to learn, should. And this is what happens in a society where you were shamed if you were a gun owner, as we were after 1996. We still have that stigma associated with us. So we are talking about a community and a society that does not understand firearms, not like here in the United States. These doctors are saying we don't even know what it entails. So you want us to assess if a person can handle it responsibly as determined by their health. We don't actually even know what this is about.
For those patients who need other assessments, say for example heavy haulage, diving, aviation medicals, there are subspecialist GPs and clinics who take that on. And we would sort of see the firearms health assessment as one of those subspecialty.
Gun doctors now. This is what they're suggesting: create another tier of the medical industrial complex with specialised gun doctors. I wonder how much that's going to cost you, lads. Insanity. But there's money involved. That's the best thing to do. You can now go to uni and train to be a gun specialist doctor. The mind boggle. I cannot believe, or maybe I can believe, that we are at this point.
Special interest, GP or non-GP specialty areas for assessment. And while, in a driver's licence assessment, we're asked to measure blood pressure, we're asked to measure their visual acuity, and there is a small section on the WA application form for any medical conditions that may impact a person's ability to drive. And we have some comprehensive guidelines and clinical guidance notes in the form of the Austroads book, which is over 200 pages. So we don't actually have that for the firearms health assessment. In terms of protection for civil and criminal claims, we've been assured of that, and that has been conveyed to the GP membership around WA. However, there have been instances perhaps in the last year or two around Australia where doctors have had to appear before a coroner's court or at inquests. Those doctors have been named and they've undergone scrutiny for the decision making. And while they are protected against civil and criminal claims, many feel that burden of responsibility of making a determination of fitness, assessing risk, is actually one step beyond that which we would normally do for other assessments.
And so noting that those inquests and inquiries have been in other jurisdictions.
Won't happen in WA.
The Bondi Junction inquiry would be, I'm not aware of others. That would probably be the most publicly known one, and that's...
I just had to cut her off there because I can't listen to too much of it. So they're saying they don't understand this, our whole community, and they do not want to be the ones assessing that risk. Full stop. Even if the government is saying you'll be protected, as she just said, people do not want to be on the front page of the Wank Australian because of their decisions with a patient if they happen to go and do something later. So let's have a listen to what Cole Blanche, the top cop, said when talking about this.
Chair, on that topic, Commissioner, don't you have the same fear that the doctors have, which every day, public opinion and media can be very cruel and limited with their information. Every day you have the fear if there is an incident, the whole scrutiny goes, why did the police let this person have a licence when this information was available and that was available? You're processing tens of thousands of these things.
Just to put in there has been a very high-profile incident with the Floriette, sorry, I can't pronounce it properly, shooting in Perth when there was a man who had been reported as threatening to the police. His family reported him as very threatening. He had a firearms license. The cops did nothing about it, despite the fact that this man had proven threats of violence against the family. He then went and shot a few of his family members. And then the police afterwards said it was because the laws were not strict enough, despite the fact that the police had the power under the old Act to remove the firearms off this person because there was proven threats against the family. So I don't know why this is obviously a conservative. We don't really have conservative politicians in Australia, but he is from the Liberal Party. He's taking great sympathy with the position that the police are in. It must be so hard being the jackboot of the state. Let's see what the cops have to say.
I think, again, it's a wicked problem of policing. I have 7,000 police out there every day who make dynamic decisions on the spot about the risk of the situation they are in. And we don't always get decisions right, and which, become very public as far as policing failures. But I think it's the job we signed up for. It's the job that we step forward for, and we make decisions. Just like me as the Commissioner, I know what I'm up for. I do the very best I can for our community to keep them as safe as possible, knowing that something tragic could happen tomorrow. we've got to make sure our systems and our processes, particularly in operationalising the laws set by Parliament, I think this is the key part. Our job is to operationalise laws and regulations the best way possible, the most streamlined way possible, because at the end of that stream is a 20-year-old police constable making decisions on the ground. And it comes from a very complex discussion into regulations, into the Commissioner's instructions, into a night shift and a police officer making a decision. Communication, clarity of message is really key part of that process.
The fun fact about that 20-year-old constable at the end, they don't actually have to do mandatory firearms training. They don't have a certain number of range visits they have to do per year. Unlike us, we the people, if you own a handgun, you have to go at least 6 times, and then it's 4 for every other firearm. From memory, I know this is definitely the case in South Australia with my father, because he has my little 22 Browning buckmark, so he has to go 6 for his revolver and 4 for my little pistol. But the police in WA do not have a mandatory number of training shoots that they have to do per year. So forgive me if I do not have much sympathy for the young 20-year-old constable, unless he's going out there and taking the initiative to train with his firearm by himself. I'll play one more from the cops and then I'll wrap up.
Continue the reconvening of the health working group to...
So this health working group, I'll just chime in for context, there was a health working group in the lead up to these new laws. Apparently, according to this testimony, the cop said that the medical industrial complex were heavily involved. They helped write this Firearm Authority health assessment, so they were a bit confused as to why there was such damning testimonies from the doctors when they got up in Parliament. And he has promised to reconvene that group. But the problem is he has put on the record that the whole thing was in consultation with the doctors, and now they're saying, well, 80% of them don't want to touch it. It's all about, well, who can he say that he asked? Which doctors did he ask? Because when you consult with people, if you want someone who agrees with you, you go to that person and say, sign off on this. If you actually want a conversation, a two-way conversation with the contrarian view, you go to someone who can challenge you on this. But in consultation in Western Australia, certainly throughout this whole firearms regime change, they have been very specific about who they consult with. I would go as far to say people who enable them. I certainly haven't been invited to any discussions, and all of my submissions and letters and feedback has been pissed on. So he's saying he's willing to consult with the doctors again, but this is law now. And this is why I'm saying it's going to be very hard to walk this back when it's gone so far. Look how much we have lost since 1996. This was not on the agenda in 1996 because of what all of this that it's come up today, the Pandora's box of problems that the cops want to keep. And you can tell by the attitude of the chair of this committee who represents the Labor government, this is something that I thought I had heard, that this Firearm Authority health assessment would be changed because of all of these issues. After watching these hearings, you can make up your own mind.
Ensure that we're always getting that feedback from our firearms community and the medical practitioners to make sure that the comfort that they feel around the point-in-time assessment and the protections they currently have under the Act are continually reinforced. I think that is important. We're not asking any doctor to project out to the future. We're saying today when you do your assessment, is that person a fit and proper person from a health perspective?
Too bad if you're having a bad day.
To hold that firearm, and can you provide me advice as the Commissioner on that so I can make the decision as to whether they are a fit and proper person? It's not their decision to make as to their entirety of their fit and proper person status. It's just in relation to their health status. It is a point in time and they are protected under the Act based on their assessment.
So this is where we're at now in Western Australia. If you've watched my past few videos, we've got so-called sovereign citizens being raided and their guns taken for their views, attitudes and opinions, even if they haven't ever been violent or convicted of a crime or threatened anyone, guns are gone. I've played a few other videos about the WA Firearms Portal, how it's a fully online digital registry now. And if you've seen that video, if you haven't seen the video, I encourage you to watch it. So this video, of course, about mental health and the mandatory health checks that is on the books now in Western Australia. What do we do? I remember this when it came out, and I wrote in my submission at the very start of all of this, going into bat with people like PTSD for the veterans, postnatal depression for the women. They just don't want to listen. They want to reduce the number of legally held firearms in the Western Australian community. That is their goal. That is what they say. That is written on their wall every morning when they go into the office. And this is just another way, more power for them to do this. Very scary times. Please, 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 if you have been affected already, let me know and we'll see what we can do to fix this. But such is the times in which we live in WA in 2025. Thank you for watching. I'm Kate Fantino, Lady Liberty Australia. I have a few more videos lined up to go before this hearing review is meant to conclude on Thursday the 16th, if they do. So I'll bring you another few soon. Thank you for watching.